right, thank you so much for the invitation to come and give this talk. I'm very excited to be here, and I thank you so much because it gives me the opportunity to connect back to my home and to help develop pharmacopoeia back there, hopefully. So I will just start here by showing my slides. Hopefully it cooperates. So today my talk is going to be about USP botanical monographs and quality standards. And I'll fold into this a talk about the USP as an organization itself, and also about how monographs are prepared and how they get published and what goes into them, and also give you a sample of some of the monographs that we have. So this is the outline of my talk. I will introduce USP, talk about the USP Compendia, talk about what constitutes a USP standard, how USP monographs are developed, and give an outline of a USP botanical monograph. And then I'll end with what the value of public standards is. So starting with the USP, that is the United States Pharmacopoeia. The United States Pharmacopoeia's mission is to improve global health through public standards and related programs that help ensure the quality, safety, and benefit of medicines and foods. And the yellow dots that you can see on the map shows areas where USP offices or labs are. As you can see, the organization is basically almost all over in the world. It's international, in other words. And I also want to give you an idea of the structure of the organization governance, because this becomes important when I begin to talk about the development of standards. So basically, on the extreme left, we have the Council of Convention here, and that is the body that is made up of different organizations from all over the world, most of them in the US, obviously. But this is the body that makes resolutions and directs the work of the company over a 5 years period. So every 5 years, the convention meets, they have discussions, and they decide what are the priority areas that the USP is going to work on in the next 5 years. They are also involved with engagement, developing bylaws, rules, and voting and elections. And then in the center, you have the number 1, 2, and 3. Those are key governing bodies. We have the convention membership, which is made up of elected board of trustees, and then elected council of the experts. And the council of experts are actually the chair of the expert committees, as we'll talk about later. And this group usually adopts the resolutions that were made by the Council of Convention and make sure that the resolutions are followed. They also amend bylaws for the organization. Then we have the Board of Trustees, number 2, and the Board of Committees that are responsible for fiduciary issues and strategy of the organization. They also have policy oversight and involved in risk management. And then number 3 is the Council of Experts and expert committees made up of volunteers. And this is a very key part of the USP structure, in that these are actually the experts that are responsible for developing the monographs. The USP staff acts as liaisons and scientists. Most of them are scientists who are involved in ensuring that the best science is used to develop the monographs. But at the end of the day, it is the Council of Experts and the expert committees that approve and adopt the standards themselves. So without the council, without the expert committees and the many volunteers that the organization has, it would be difficult to develop standards. And of course, the expert committees usually have subcommittees and expert panels that advise them, including expert advisors. So that is a structure, and I'll talk more about this at some point. So this is actually a slide that shows you where USP has come from. USP is now 200 years old, and it was started in 1820 by 11 founding members who are mainly physicians. And at that time, the USP developed pharmacopoeia that had 217 medicines, most of them natural medicines, that is botanicals, minerals, and such like stuff. And at that time, there was no formal legal recognition of USP, even in the US. And so the pharmacopoeia was mainly focused on US only. Now, fast forward 200 years later, on the right, we have over 1,000 staff members and more than 1,000 expert volunteers worldwide. We have about 6,000 monographs covering pharmaceuticals, food ingredients, herbal medicines, and dietary supplements. The standards are now not only used in the US, but are used in more than 140 countries worldwide, and legally recognized in many countries as well, about 40 of them. And in addition to the monographs, we also have expanded offerings in that we have about 4,000 reference materials, reference standards. We have 6,000 professionals trained worldwide per year, and we have verification programs, and we have global health impact programs that are all over the world. And then again, the organization itself, like I showed you on the map, is all over the world. We have facilities in India, China, Brazil, Switzerland, Ghana, Ethiopia, and there's continued commitment in the United States as well. So what is unique about USP? We talk about many pharmacopoeias all over the world. We talk about the British Pharmacopoeia, European Pharmacopoeia, and so on and so forth. But USP is unique in that it is an independent science-based organization. It has no connection with the government. And the beauty of this is that it makes it possible for it to develop standards which are scientifically based and can be used anywhere else apart from the US. Number two is that we value most the spirit of volunteerism. The standards are actually set by volunteers, as I mentioned, because although the USP staff will write the standards scientifically based, but it is the volunteers who will approve those standards after review and continuous review. There is transparency in the process because since it's being developed by volunteer experts who are independent people, they don't represent the interests of, for example, the government or their institution. We have representation in the volunteers of international regulators, industry, healthcare practitioners, and so on and so forth. So it's a very well holistic approach to developing the standard. There's a lot of collaboration and standards in engagement with stakeholders via various fora, as you'll see. The USP has technical leadership in analytical sciences. It has staff that are very well trained in medicine, food quality science, and standards. And we develop standards not only for medicines, but also for foods, beginning from food ingredients and even dietary supplements. And we also develop standards for healthcare quality. In addition, we have public health programs all over the world. So that is about the USP. So with all that, what does the USP produce? The USP produces compendia. Compendia, which is composed of different books. Let's call them books at this point, although we don't print them now. And that's what I'm going to give you a view of. So here on this slide, I have the online compendia. Right now, we do not print the books anymore. We only have them online. So everything is available online, either for a fee or for free. So we have the famous USPNF. This is actually a combination of two books, the United States Pharmacopeia and the National Formulary. They were separate books, but at some point they merged and formed one book. So this is available online. We have the Pharmacopoeia Forum, which is also online only, has always been online. And the Pharmacopoeia Forum is an intermediate publication. So once the standards are drafted, the draft is published in the Pharmacopoeia Forum, and this is free, and anybody can make comments on that publication. The idea is to seek stakeholder input and then incorporate that where it's necessary. And then we have the dietary supplement compendium on the right. This compendium actually contains monographs for dietary supplements. Those monographs are obtained from the USPNF. So it's the same monographs in USPNFs are transferred here. But in addition to the monograph, we then also have additional information like illustrations, like admission evaluations, which is safety review of some of the ingredients. So it provides a place where dietary supplement manufacturers can go and find everything that they need in terms of quality. Then below, we have the Food Chemical Codex, which contains standards for for food ingredients. Then we have the Herbal Medicines Compendium, and we also have a verification program that helps verify dietary supplement and ingredients as third-party verifiers. And lastly, we have reference materials that I already talked about, and these are used together with the monographs. So here, what I'm showing is the USPNF, and what is in the USPNF. What is in the USPNF are the general notices, general chapters, and monographs. And you will see that all those, for somebody to use a USP monograph effectively, they have to have good knowledge of general notices, general chapters, and as well as the monograph, not only the monographs. And then on the right here, we have a sample of what a monograph looks like. This is for aloe leaf juice concentrate. This is the DSC, Dietary Supplement Compendium, and it contains monographs that are abstracted from the USPNF and the Food Chemical Codex. It has summary admission evaluation, which is the safety reviews of ingredients that we develop monographs for dietary supplement. And we have regulatory guidelines, illustrations, reference tools that are relevant for the dietary supplement industry. Then we have the Herbal Medicines Compendium. This is the newest compendia of the USP and launched in 2013. Basically, it contains monographs for herbal ingredients that are recognized in other countries than the US, because the US doesn't have a category called herbal medicines. So the ingredients that go into this particular compendium will have been approved by national authorities in other countries for use in herbal medicines and are deemed appropriate for inclusion in this compendium. So that is the set of compendia. And I wanted to go into that because sometimes it's very confusing when we talk about DSC, USPNS, and HMC. But hopefully I've given you some idea. And if you have questions, I'll be willing to answer them later. So now I'd like to talk about what constitutes USP documentary standard and how these standards are created. So basically, there is hierarchy in the documentary standards. We have the monographs, which is what everybody is familiar with more. And then we have the general chapters and general notices. And general notices and requirements is actually the baseline for everything else, as it has to be met by each of the monographs and the general chapters, and you'll see why. So the general notices present basic assumptions, definitions, and default conditions for interpretation and application of the USPNF. So one needs to very well understand the general notices because everything there applies to all of the USPNF. It applies to all articles recognized in USPNF and to all general chapters unless specifically stated otherwise. So there is also provision, it's general, but also gives provision for special situations. Similarly, in monographs, requirements within the monograph will supersede what is in the general notices or general chapters if that is necessary. So at the end of the day, when you use a monograph, you just must understand that it has to comply with the requirements for the general notices and the specified general chapters. However, in some cases, the general chapter may not apply if certain conditions apply to that particular ingredient only. And then we have the general chapters, which provide guidelines on activities related to tests and procedures in the monograph. And then the general chapters may also contain description of tests, procedures, general information on interpretation of the compendium requirements, and general guidance on official substances or official products. Generally, there are three, the general notices can be divided into three. We have, and they are numbered, number 1 to over 2,000. The numbers, the general chapters number 1 to 999 are usually about general tests and assays, and these would apply to all monographs and usually would form part of the requirement for the monograph. Then the ones numbered 1,000 to 1,199 are usually for general information. In other words, information that is good to know, but you don't necessarily have to comply with in order to meet the monograph specifications. And then we have those over 2,000, which are specifically for dietary supplements. And then now that is the baseline for what a monograph is and how it's applied and how it's used. So how do we make these monographs? So in the making of the monograph, the USP staff, scientific staff generally work with the sponsor to create a monograph. So there's continuous communication with sponsors. Sponsors will usually provide data that will help to create the monograph. Sponsors or the laboratories for USP laboratories provide information for testing, identity, strength, purity, and composition, etc., and to help develop a specification for a particular monograph. And now the USP staff will usually then draft the monograph, and the monograph is then reviewed by the expert committees, who then give in their comments and their contribution from their expertise. And then the monograph is then published in PF, where it stays for 90 days. Within the 90 days, the idea is to provide a forum where stakeholders can then give input. They give their comments, their suggestions of how to improve the monograph, or if there's something they disagree with. And each and every one comment that comes in through the PF will be addressed by the scientists at USP and the expert committees. And if appropriate and if justified, then the monograph may be changed. And if not, again, a reason is given to the commenter as to why that is not the case. And after that, the monograph is then modified after the comments, and then again, the expert committees will go through the monograph and decide if they approve for the monograph to be published and to become official. And then after a waiting period, it becomes official. USP usually receives comments and requests for revision of monographs all the time. And we encourage any comments or revisions that are required. For example, if you're using a monograph and you see that a certain test doesn't work for you, you can talk with the USP staff and give your comments. And if necessary, a monograph can be revised if that is the best thing that needs to be done. So it's a very iterative process. It's a very continuous revision process that is open to the public. So that is how basically a monograph is made. Now, what is actually within the monograph? So we've talked about monographs, and Professor Caterere talked about pharmacopoeia and monographs in other pharmacopoeia. And we know that we have pharmacopoeias, like the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, and we have the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia. But I want to make a distinction between phytotherapeutic pharmacopoeia and quality pharmacopoeia. The USP is makes standards and prepares quality pharmacopoeia for quality standards. While if you look at American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, it's more of a phytotherapeutic pharmacopoeia. It contains a lot of information, but what it doesn't have is a acceptance criteria that defines the quality of the article. So that is the difference between that. So in terms of the components of a USP botanical monograph, let's see what it has. So basically, a monograph is a list of official and validated tests, their analytical procedures and acceptance criteria, very important. And together, this defines specifications for identity, purity, limit of contaminants, content, strength and composition, quality, performance, and other requirements. And in the US, monographs for dietary supplement will be consistent with the FDA current good manufacturing practices. So now, how does this translate to what is actually in the monograph? Here we go. So when you look at a monograph, what you will see is a title, which is normally crafted according to guidelines. And then we have the second part is the definition, which will usually give you the essential characteristics of what the substance is or what the herbal material is. Meaning it will have the plant name, common name, genus, species, variety, plant part, and so on. And it will also tell you what is the quality marker, as we'll see. Then we have identity, and this is to help determine whether what you actually have as a herbal is what is defined in the definition. So here you'll be talking about certain microscopic, macroscopic features, phytochemical characteristics, and profile of the constituents. Then we have strength and composition, alluding to the constituents with known activity, or that are used just as markers, or that are toxic, but help you to make sure that we don't end up with toxic constituents. Then we have a section about limit of contaminants such as aflatoxins, heavy metals, residues, microbial, and so on and so forth. And then we have a section that talks about the labeling. If there's any specific information that needs to go to the label, like a warning label, or if in the case of dietary supplements, for example, it is required that the name of the article be on the label of a product, but also the Latin binomial and the plant part. So such information goes here. Then it also tells you about how to store, package, and store, how to pack and store the material so that it maintains its quality through its shelf life. So talking of the title, so this is an example of how we determine the title of a monograph. This is the case of turmeric, and these are ingredients that are derived from turmeric. So in the case of turmeric, we have the whole botanical material at the top, powdered botanical material next, native extract, and additional processed extracts. And then we have isolated class of compounds and purified single chemical entity. So each of these would have different characteristics and a different standard and different names. And so we'll have turmeric rhizome, so plant part, the plant name and the plant part, and then the plant name, plant part, and the state. And then we have the turmeric rhizome dry extract. Then we have the turmeric rhizome curcuminoid extract, meaning that the extract has been purified further, and we have mainly curcuminoids as the constituent of that extract. And then that can be further purified so that you end up with only the curcuminoids. In that case, now we have the name delinked from the name of the material. We only use the name of the compounds themselves. And then if you further purify that, you end up with a single chemical entity, which then uses just the chemical name itself. So for most of the herbal ingredients, we have a family of monographs, meaning that there will be a monograph derived from one particular botanical which are similar in this way, shape, and form. And we have a guideline that helps with this. Then now here, I want to give you an example of a monograph and go through the different sections here. This is powdered decaffeinated green tea extract. We have the common name used in this case. We have the Latin binomial included in the definition here. And then we have also the genus species and the discoverer of the name. We have the plant parts included. We have the post-harvest season, chemical name, and so on and so forth. As you see, that is the powdered decaffeinated green tea extract. That is the Latin binomial, as well as the family. And then we have the plant part there. And then we have the method of preparation. And then we have the particular constituent that we'll be looking for to ensure its quality. That is the acceptance criteria. So that is that. And then the next part of the monograph is the identification, in which we'll have tests that are provided that helps you identify whether you have the right substance. In this case, we use HPLC and HPTLC. HPTLC particularly is a technique that has become very well used and very powerful in telling apart different species. So it's important for us here. And most of the time we try to use orthogonal techniques. And also, as you can see, we are looking for the specific constituents that we mentioned in the definition. So then we have the composition. We also try to make sure that we look at we give quantitative tests that will enable you to determine the marker compound to the level that it is supposed to be. And most of the time we use liquid chromatography for this part. And in this case, as you can see here, we have, in this case, we're using LC with detection at 278 nanometers. And then we have two standard solutions, because the standard solutions will help you in doing your quantitation, but also will help you see whether you have the right profile of what you're looking for, in this case, green tea, decaffeinated green tea. And so in addition to giving the acceptance criteria, which, if you remember from our definition, was that it should be not less than 40% epigallocatechin gallate and not less than 60% polyphenols. And we also give you relative retention times for those particular constituents that you'll be looking for. So at this point, I want to mention that this is all that you find in a monograph. But if you go to the DAC, then you will actually find the chromatograms that will give you a picture of what you will actually see. So that's the added advantage of looking at the DAC. So that is in terms of composition, which is important in setting the quality of the material. Then, of course, in terms of quality, again, we want to make sure that the substance doesn't have contaminants. And for this, we normally look for contaminants like residual solvents. And remember that I mentioned general chapters. Here, you will find that in most cases, you will be referred to a general chapter. So when you see the squiggly brackets that we are seeing, like the number residual solvents 467, that means you should determine residual solvents according to general chapter 467, and that you should meet the requirements for that chapter. So in this case, again, we have general chapters for pesticides, aflatoxins, and basically the monograph will refer you to those specific chapters that you should adhere to. And it will just tell you, make sure that it meets the requirements. And then we also have tests for microbial enumeration, ensuring that total microbial count does not exceed 10 to the power 4 colony forming units per gram. And combined yeast and mold does not exceed 10 to the power 3 CFU per G. And then ensure that the absence of E. coli and Salmonella species. So those are the contaminants. And this will be the case for most of the botanicals, but there may also be other requirements, specific requirements for a particular monograph. And then in terms of specific tests, there are some specific tests. In the case of green tea here, we need specific tests to limit or quantitate tests for identifying adulteration. In the case of green tea can be adulterated with garlic acid to fool the test for polyphenols. And so we want to make sure that the garlic acid is not above a certain level. So we have that as a specific test for green tea. For other herbals, you may have other specific tests. So in this case, green tea, you have, again, a test for the limit of caffeine, because this particular monograph is for decaffeinated green tea extract. So we don't want caffeine to be in that extract. So you have a limit for garlic acid, and then you have a limit for caffeine as well in the green tea. And again, you will find here that there are other tests for which you will be referred to, like for water determination, you are referred to chapters 921. For residual ignition, you are referred to 281. Similarly, you have to comply with the acceptance criteria that is specified in the monograph. And then in the case of, for example, bilberry, here we'll be trying to make sure that the material is not adulterated with dyes. And a simple test like this HPLC will tell you if you have dyes added to the bilberry. And again, by looking at the chromatogram, which is on the right. So I'm just trying to be conscious of the time. So I'm trying to sort of rush through this, but I hope that I've communicated that. So then I want to talk a little about the dietary supplement compendium and the supplementary information that you can find there, because here you will find very useful information if you're dealing with herbal, if you're dealing with botanicals or other dietary supplements. So in this case, again, the dietary supplement compendium is wholly online. And so when you go online, you will find that you have what you call associated documents. And under the associated documents, you'll find illustrations and admission evaluation. In this case, we are talking about Centella sciatica, which I've shown below the orange illustration chart, you see that the monograph is over there. And under illustrations, you'll find the macroscopic pictures. You'll find pictures such as what I'm showing here. You have the aerial parts, pictures of the aerial parts, dried aerial parts. You have the microscopic features of transverse section of the material. You have, you have information about the constituents that are the marker constituents that are also the active constituents, acetic acid, baricacic acid, and so on and so forth. And then you have pictures of the HPLC chromatogram. And most of the cases, we have pictures of the chromatogram seen under white light or under UV. For example, in this case, we have a picture of the chromatogram there under white light. Then we have a picture of chromatogram, which has already been developed with a reagent, but under 366, and then also under the white light. So this is very useful information, because when you prepare the chromatogram, then you know what to look for if everything is working correctly. And then we also have chromatograms, such as the one shown on the extreme right. So lastly, you have the admission evaluations, which I mentioned before. These are the safety review documents. So because dietary supplements are regulated differently in the US, a lot of materials are in the market for which we may not want to develop quality standards. So we have a gatekeeping process, which is what we call admission evaluations, whereby we do a safety evaluation on an ingredient to determine that it is not associated with a serious risk to health. In that process, we consider all these sets of information here. We have, we talk with the stakeholders. If you look at the center part of it, the purple boxes, we have communication with stakeholders to determine what we generally want to develop monographs for. And that is based on apparent efficacy, demand for the public standard, and the need for public protection. Once we decide on the on the type of monographs we want to develop, then a scientific liaison at USP, we look for data about that particular ingredient, looking for human data, pharmacological data, and data on how it's used historically, regulatory statuses, and official monographs that are available about it. The idea is to put this together, synthesize, and determine if the ingredient is associated with serious risk to health. If it is associated with serious risk to health, then it is not admitted for monograph development and no monograph is developed, that it is put in class B. If it is admitted, it goes into class A, whereby monograph development can proceed, and then we end up with a monograph. But either way, we also continuously revise the information. We continuously monitor the literature. If something was denied admission, we look for if there's any new information that will change that status to admit it, or if it was admitted, we look for information if there's anything out there that shows that it is associated with serious risk to health, then we will probably omit it from monographs later. So this information for the dietary supplement community is important, because then they can be able to see whether the ingredient they're looking at is actually good to go into dietary supplements. So here is a sample of what an admission evaluation looks like. I know you may not be able to read all of it, but basically it has an introduction, definition, pharmacopoeia monograph section, chemistry and identity, potential adulterants and substituents and contaminants, typical intake labels as a dietary supplement. Then it has clinical data, adverse events data, toxicological information, and then concluding remarks at the end of it all. It also looks at potential for interactions, because as we know, people may take herbal medicines or other dietary supplement, not thinking that they can create a problem, but we know for sure that combined with other things, there is likely to be, not likely, but there's potential that in some cases there may be interactions that are adverse. So that brings me almost to the end of my presentation. But what I just want to emphasize is that in this way of creating public standards, then we provide appropriate titles for ingredients and for substances and useful definitions that can help somebody understand what an ingredient or a substance is. And because we use validated methods, these methods are really helpful when somebody is working in a lab and trying to determine whether they have the right thing and it's of the right quality or not. We also establish limits, and together, all this information is very useful as it provides a scientific basis for decision making, particularly for regulatory bodies, in the sense that then they know what the quality of material that is in the market is. And in our case, if we are looking at dietary supplements, for example, then you are sure that if it conforms to the USP standard, then you know that it has undergone admission evaluation, that is not associated with serious risks to health, that it's of good quality as well. It allows for a consistent approach to quality, because when you have public standards and these standards are used by different manufacturers, then a consumer, for example, can go to the market and be able to compare products if they are conforming to the same standard. And it is easy to know if it's of quality or not. And it also helps with monitoring of counterfeiting and also products that are adulterated that are in the market. So basically helps maintain quality, and quality goes hand in hand with safety. And in that way, it helps to protect public health. And with that, I can say thank you very much. I am ready for questions if you have any for me, or I also provide my email here and you can get in touch with me in order to talk more about this subject, which I am very passionate about. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Helen. It's been a very elaborate explanation, and that really brings to light, the theme of this afternoon's webinar, Understanding Pharmacopeia and Monograms, which and why. And for me, I'm sure our participants will have a lot of questions to really direct at you, because there's quite a use of so many words like the Pharmacopoeia, the National Formulary, dietary supplements, Compendium, Herbal medicine standards. So which is which and how, which one do I go for? So please, we want to encourage every one of us to please ask questions. The essence is for us to have a better understanding of the difference of these compendiums and how do we use them? Which one do we go for and why do we go for it? So thank you once again, Dr. Helen, for that very elaborate. We'll just go to the next speaker. Please write down your questions. And after the presentation, we'll have sessions where people really want to ask questions. So the next speaker I want to quickly introduce is our friend, Uli Feiter, who is going to talk about the Nagoya Protocol and good sample collection. I just want us to pay close attention. I'm sure there's going to be information that will be very useful to all of us. Once again, we want to welcome you to this webinar. I want to believe that as many as are listening, they are gaining so much knowledge and information. Over to you, Feiter, sir.